Hello everyone, Ben here with hopefully a short video for Biomes Megafauna determining the occupation of biomes for the solo game. Now, I probably briefly touched upon this in my playthrough video, but not to the full extent simply because I ran out of water and died off. So hopefully this video will cover it in slightly better detail and clear up any misconceptions. So basically, normally if you are continuing from Biogenesis, you'll be playing on the Earthside Cratons, which have, for the normal game, basically the spaces for herbivores and carnivores. However, for the sake of simplicity and to helpfully illustrate the point a bit further, I will be using the Mars Cratons simply because they actually have the dedicated spaces for plants, herbivores and carnivores in the relevant biomes. So that is the only reason I am using the Mars side, but basically you can apply everything to the Earth Cratons if you so choose. The way this works is each biome, so each of these individual hex squares, or spaces, sorry, in the biomes is its own little ecosystem, and it has relevant spaces for plants, herbivores and carnivores. So within each biome there are 3 levels which you can occupy with various species pieces. So plants at the bottom, for example on the middle one here, plants at the bottom, herbivores in this middle layer here, and then carnivores in this top triangle here. So these can actually be placed, these can actually be filled by the relevant species to illustrate the food chain, as it were, in the individual biomes. So to start with, we always need plants. So in the solo game you always have to have plants in a biome, otherwise you cannot have anything else. And plants can only be the green pieces, so we will put a green plant, in this case an archetype, into the relevant plant level in the biome, so the bottom triangle, so that's plants. Green pieces can only ever be plants and herbivores, and white pieces can only, or player pieces, in this case white pieces, can only ever be herbivores and carnivores. So contests will only be between herbivores, because they are the only spaces in the biome that can be occupied by, in the solo game, plants and player pieces. I say plants, if I say plants and it's not obvious I'm talking about the plant level of the food chain, it basically means green player pieces. So I will try to be slightly clearer with that. So green player pieces can be plants and herbivores. Normal player pieces, white in this case, can be herbivores and carnivores, and herbivores are basically the only slots that are going to have a contest, because they're the only places that can be occupied by both plant green player pieces and normal pieces. So we have our plant, our green piece here, to start things off, and you decide that you come in with an armoured, and you start snacking on the plants. So before you move into the biome, you make a conscious decision to place your piece in the herbivore layer. So it is not something that happens automatically as per game rules. It is something that the player themselves have to decide before they come into a biome, which level of the food chain do you want to occupy. So it's very simple in this case, because the herbivore level is the only realistic one to occupy. So we will come in as herbivores. We can't come in as plants because we can't be plants, and we could come in as carnivores, but we have no herbivores to snack on, so we would die off straight away. So, job done, but basically it is a conscious player decision to come in as, in this case, herbivores. So we are in as herbivores, and nothing else about the species, apart from the shape of it, is relevant for coming in as a herbivore or a carnivore in the player case. Size does not matter, cubes does not matter. The only thing that is relevant is the shape, simply because archetypes are fair game for everybody, so they can be eaten by other archetypes, and they can be eaten by every other shape. Other shapes can only ever be eaten by the specific other shape. So in this case, the green archetype dome can quite happily be eaten by the armoured, but basically shape is the only consideration when you come into a hex or a biome for what you want to occupy. So for example, if the plant was an armoured, then you could come in as an armoured, in which case you'll be fine because armours can eat other armoureds. If you came in as a burrower, you would not be fine because burrowers cannot eat armoureds. So you could come in a herbivore slot as a burrower, but you would not survive very long because you cannot eat the armoureds. So that is basically, shape is the only real consideration when you want to come into a space. The other aspects of your species, your size and your relevant cubes, will come into effect if there is a contest, and I'll come on to contest in just a second. So we have the starting plants, we have the herbivore level occupied by yourselves, and that is pretty much it, basically. If, for example, the green player, the plant player, had come in with his plants as herbivore plants, so he had decided to occupy the herbivore level, and they very, very well do. The AI plants are predisposed to coming in as herbivores wherever they can. They will always try and do it if there are relevant areas. Then you could come in as a carnivore. So again, you make a conscious decision to occupy the biome in the carnivore level. So again, you can do so because you can, your armoured can snack on the herbivore armoured, who can snack on the archetype plant. So that is also fine. Now, if there was a herbivore armoured there, snacking on their own archetype dome plant, then you could come in as a herbivore. So you would make the decision that you want to occupy the herbivore level this time, not the carnivore level, so the herbivore level, in which case there would be a contest. And this is where the relevant parts of the species come into play. So you would come in, you would initiate a contest when it comes to the relevant part in the round, and this is then where you do the herbivore contest and you go down the list to basically try and break the tie, ideally in your favour, but either way in somebody's favour, and then one herbivore would die off and one herbivore would survive. So let's get that latitude die out of the way for the time being. So we have a contest, we have green which was there, white which has pushed its way in, and there is now a herbivore contest. So first of all you would check inedibility. So this is only relevant if there is a carnivore. So for example, if there was a previous carnivore that was mistakenly in there maybe in this case, but either way you would check to see which species can be eaten by the carnivore and which cannot. If there is a species which can be eaten by the carnivore, they would be eaten to extinction essentially, and they would lose the herbivore contest and then you also survive. And the ramifications for the carnivores would then play out depending on what species won the contest. But for the example here, we will not have carnivores, we will just have the two herbivores. So then we will come down to the Roadrunner, and this is dependent again in this solo game. So normally on the normal game you have the Earth cratons, and each craton biome will have its own individual arrow, which determines the tiebreak for the relevant species. So in this one, for example, you had the two armoureds in the herbivore contest. Which of them has the most yellow cubes? Figure it out. Whichever one has wins the tiebreak, basically. In the solo game, however, the Roadrunner contest is based on the species of plant that is in there. So you have a handy table in the back of the rulebook, and this will tell you what the relevant contest is basically between yellow or red cubes, depending on the individual plant species. So in this case for cacti be yellow. And whichever one has the most yellow cubes would win the tiebreak. Again, if we're equal, we come down to humidity, and this is again another solo exception. Normally, in a normal game, you would check on the latitude strip, and depending on where you are in the latitude, you would then tiebreak green or white cubes. However, in the solo game, the humidity is always green, so you would only go with green for a tiebreak. Then you check size, and this is where size of your species come into it. So you individual size, species, and basically carry on down the herbivore contest until one herbivore is essentially dominant and wins the contest. The other one would then become endangered and go extinct at round's end, and the successful winner would survive to carry on for the next round, with ramifications for any carnivores if there were some. So, yep, contests will only happen at herbivore level. Neither plants nor player pieces can both occupy the plant level, because only plants can be plants, and only player pieces can be carnivores. So basically you have the herbivore level only in a particular biome, which can be occupied potentially by both plants and player pieces. So this is the only place you're going to find a contest. The AI species will always check to see if it can win a contest first before it moves in. So basically you do a quick kind of head check of the relevant contest criteria. If it would lose when it actually moved in, it won't even bother to try to move in. It will simply skip that particular biome and move somewhere else. You are not bound by the same restrictions. You can move into a particular biome even if you know you're going to lose the relevant contest, simply for purposes of maybe getting your piece out, but that's entirely up to you with strategy. But the AI will always check to see if it will win the relevant contest first. If it won't go into the biome. But if it will definitely try to occupy herbivore levels first, and then plant levels if it has no choice. A species can be both different levels. So for plants, you could very well have an archetype, well, not necessarily archetype, but you could very well have a same shape species, so armoured in this case, as both plants in a biome and herbivores in another biome. The same shape can never be two different levels in the same biome. So for example, you could not have in this case armoured being both plants and herbivores. It does not happen. I believe it's the no cannibalism rule, essentially. But you can have the same shape as different levels in different biomes. So armoured could very well be plants in one biome and herbivores in another biome. Similarly, you could be, not that way around, you could very well be herbivores in one biome and carnivores in another biome with the same shape. So shapes are not tied down to a particular level in the food chain. They can be whichever level, again, you consciously decide to put them in as in a particular biome. But in the same biome, they cannot be two different levels. That is the only restriction there, I believe. And hopefully that was all edge cases, I think. Any further questions, feel free to let me know. I hope this video made it a bit clearer on the rules of occupying various biomes, more than I could do simply by trying to type it out, basically. So yeah, I hope it was followable enough that the gist got across. Yeah, and I will see you next time.